I've been delivering pizzas for a few years, and nothing about the job surprises me anymore. Weird customers, strange houses, and late-night creeps all come with the territory. But nothing compares to what happened one Christmas Eve. It was a slow night, and I was counting down the hours until the end of my shift when an order came in for a delivery to a gated community on the edge of town. The name on the order was one I didn't recognize, but the address was a mansion I had driven by a few times before. It belonged to someone famous. I can't share her name, but you would know who she is. The roads were slick with snow, and the night felt strangely quiet as I pulled up to the gates. They opened automatically, which I thought was odd since most gated homes require a code. I made my way up the long driveway, past a few dark windows, and parked near the front entrance. The house was huge, but it seemed lifeless. Only a single window on the upper floor was lit. When I got out, I noticed a package on the front steps. It was wrapped in shiny red paper with a gold bow, like a Christmas gift. There was no name on it, no tag, nothing to indicate who it was from. Something about it gave me the creeps. I knocked on the door and waited, holding the pizza box and trying not to look at the package. A moment later, the door opened just enough for me to see her face. She looked nervous and tired, like she hadn't slept in days. She glanced behind me, her eyes darting toward the driveway and the trees beyond. Then she took the pizza and handed me the cash without saying much. Before I could leave, I saw her expression change. Her eyes fixed on the package on the steps, and she froze. I asked if she was okay, but she didn't answer. She just stared at it, her hands trembling. She quickly pulled me inside and shut the door. She told me she had been dealing with someone following her for weeks. It started with anonymous letters showing up in her mailbox, then flowers left on her car. The gifts escalated: creepy dolls, photos of her walking alone, even recordings of her on the phone. The police were involved, but whoever it was hadn't been caught despite security cameras. She was terrified and asked if I could check the yard to see if anyone was there. I didn't want to, but I couldn't say no. I grabbed a flashlight she handed me and stepped back outside, feeling exposed in the cold night. The snow-covered ground was eerily quiet, the crunch of my boots the only sound. I scanned the driveway, the trees, and the shadows stretching across the yard. At first, I saw nothing unusual. Then, near the edge of the property, I noticed footprints in the snow. They were fresh, leading from the woods to the house and stopping near the steps where the package had been left. There were no footprints leading away. I felt a knot in my stomach as I followed the trail toward the trees. The flashlight flickered, and for a second, I thought I saw someone standing between the trunks. Tall, motionless, watching. But when I blinked, they were gone. I stood there for a moment, listening, trying to convince myself my eyes were playing tricks on me. I hurried back to the house and told her what I saw. She looked like she was on the verge of breaking down. She asked me to stay for a while, and I agreed. I sat near the door, my flashlight in hand, while she made calls to the police. Not long after, there was a noise outside, a scraping sound like something being dragged. I bolted to the window and saw the package was gone. The footprints in the snow were still there, but there was a new set leading back to the woods. Whoever had been watching her had taken their gift back. The police arrived about 10 minutes later. They searched the area but didn't find anyone. They told her to stay somewhere else for the night and promised to increase patrols in the neighborhood. She thanked me before leaving with the officers, though she still looked terrified. I drove back to the restaurant, my hands shaking the entire way. I couldn't stop thinking about the footprints or the figure I thought I saw in the woods. Whatever it wasn't just a stalker. It felt like something worse, something that thrived on fear. I never delivered to that house again, and I don't know what happened to her after that night. I still think about it every Christmas Eve, wondering if the person or thing that had been following her ever stopped.
I was 16 when I received the strangest Christmas gift of my life. It came wrapped in green paper with tiny snowmen printed on it, tied with a thin red ribbon. The tag on the front read my name in a familiar, loopy handwriting. My grandmother's handwriting. The problem was, she had passed away the previous summer. The tag was signed with her usual warm holiday greeting, something she wrote on every gift she gave. My parents insisted they had nothing to do with it. They were as puzzled as I was, maybe more so. They said it must have been an old gift she had left behind, something they found and added to the pile without thinking. But that didn't make sense. The paper looked fresh, the ink too crisp to have been written months ago. Inside the package was a small, leather-bound journal. It smelled faintly of lavender, the same scent that always clung to my grandmother's clothes. The first page contained her unmistakable handwriting. It was a note for me, something about how I should write down my thoughts and dreams. Her words felt personal, as if she'd written them knowing I would read them after she was gone. The following pages were blank, at least at first. Over the next few days, I began to notice faint impressions appearing on the pages. At first, I thought they were old notes bleeding through the paper, but the writing was in the same neat, familiar script. It wasn't anything I had written, and neither had she, as far as I could tell. The entries were dated in the future, just a few weeks ahead. The first message was innocuous, predicting I would ace my upcoming history test. I hadn't even studied much, but it happened exactly as described. A few days later, the journal noted I would trip on the icy front steps and scrape my knee. That too happened, no matter how careful I was. The entries became more unsettling as Christmas approached. They detailed events with increasing precision, conversations with friends, moments I hadn't told anyone about. The words felt like they were watching me, recording my life before it even unfolded. On Christmas Eve, I opened the journal to find a new entry. The words chilled me. They described a knock on the door late at night, followed by a visitor I shouldn't trust. It warned me not to open the door under any circumstances. I was so unsettled I couldn't sleep, the journal clutched tightly in my hands. When the knock came, exactly as described, I froze. It was almost midnight, and no one should have been out in the snow. My parents were asleep upstairs, the house deadly quiet except for the sound of someone persistently knocking. My heart raced, but I stayed put. In the morning, I found the journal on my nightstand where I had left it. The warning was gone, replaced with a simple thank you. As if someone or something was pleased I had listened. I never heard the knock again, but the journal continued to write itself for weeks after. Eventually, the pages stopped filling. I keep it locked away now. I haven't opened it in years, but sometimes I wonder if the predictions would start again if I did.
The snow was falling thick and heavy, swallowing the road ahead of me as I gripped the wheel tightly. The radio crackled with static, barely managing to push out a garbled Christmas carol before cutting out entirely. I should have left earlier. The last thing I wanted was to be driving alone on Christmas Eve, in the dead of night, but work had run late, and now here I was, crawling along a winding, desolate road that seemed to stretch endlessly into the void. The trees pressed close on either side, their skeletal branches clawing at the sky, casting shadows that flickered in the car's headlights. The clock on the dashboard read 11:43 p.m. My family was waiting for me. There'd be laughter, food, warmth. I just needed to get there. Then I saw it. At first, I thought it was a deer, a pale, hunched figure on the side of the road, just barely visible through the snowfall. But as I slowed down, squinting to make out the shape, I realized it wasn't moving. It stood unnaturally still, facing the woods, as if listening to something deeper in the dark. I slowed the car almost to a stop, unsure of what to do. The figure was tall, impossibly tall, its limbs too long, its body draped in something tattered and gray. My headlights seemed to catch its edges wrong, as if it weren't entirely solid, the snow swirling around it in ways that didn't make sense. And then it turned. Its face, if you could call it that, was pale and featureless, save for two hollow, black holes where eyes should have been. It didn't seem to look at me so much as through me, and in that instant, I felt a coldness that reached deeper than the December air. My body locked, my breath caught in my throat. I couldn't move, couldn't think. Then it raised a hand. A long, bony finger pointed directly at me, and I swear I heard a sound not from the figure, but from somewhere deep inside my own head. A voice, or maybe just a whisper. Words I couldn't understand, but somehow knew I was meant to obey. Go home. The headlights flickered. For a moment, the road was plunged into darkness, and when they blinked back on, the figure was gone. Just like that. The snow fell, the trees swayed, and the road ahead lay empty as if nothing had ever been there. I didn't wait. I slammed my foot on the gas, the tires spinning briefly before catching, and the car lurched forward. My hands were trembling so badly I could barely keep the wheel steady. I didn't dare look in the rearview mirror, afraid of what I might see or not see behind me. By the time I pulled into the driveway, my heart was racing, my skin clammy despite the cold. The house was lit up with warm, golden lights, a stark contrast to the bleak darkness I'd just escaped. I stumbled out of the car, barely remembering to lock it behind me, and hurried to the front door. Inside, the laughter and chatter of my family spilled into the entryway. The smell of roasted turkey and pine needles wrapped around me like a blanket, but it did nothing to ease the tightness in my chest. There you are. My mother called from the dining room. We were starting to worry. I forced a smile as I stepped into the room. They were all there, seated around the table, their faces lit with joy and anticipation. But as I sat down, my father's brow furrowed. "You're pale as a ghost," he said, leaning closer. "What happened?" "Yeah," my sister chimed in. "You okay?" I hesitated. The words sat on the edge of my tongue, but they felt too heavy to speak. How could I explain what I'd seen? How could I make them understand the way that thing had looked at me, as if it knew me, as if it had been waiting? "It's nothing," I said finally, shaking my head. "Just the drive. The snow was bad." They didn't press further, but I felt their eyes on me as we started the meal. I could barely eat, my appetite lost to the knot of fear still coiled in my stomach. Later that night, as I lay awake in the guest bedroom, staring at the ceiling, I thought about the figure. About how it had told me to go home. And I couldn't help but wonder if it had meant this home or if it was still out there, waiting for me to return to wherever it truly came from.